Look at the box office results for 2024, and you're going to see the top 20 or so grossing projects are all legacy properties, sequels, remakes, soft reboots, or film adaptations of books. And towards the later half of the year, I started watching lots of these movies in order to do a tier list stream on this channel, which I did. I suffered through the best Hollywood could make, and believe me, most of it was pathetic. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent to practically tell the exact same stories over again with minor or sometimes massive adjustments, and of course, trying to sell feelings of nostalgia in places of originality and emotional connection. I say often that Hollywood writers hate themselves, they hate the world, and they hate you, the viewer and the customer. We live in an age where writers, directors, creatives are no longer being creative. Now, there are financial implications there, sure. Studios need to greenlight projects and make funds available to make said art, but the point remains that the art being produced right now is just not satisfying. Rick Rubin, who many of you will recognize from his dramatic impacts in the music industry, explained very well in his book, The Creative Act, that the best way to be creative, in a sense, is to make the things you want to see made. Create things for yourself, and you will find an audience who shares similar sentiments and will appreciate your work. By making something for you, you're going to be the most authentic and create the best possible work. I'm paraphrasing one of his lessons, of course. The point being, let's take that at face value. Let's say modern-day Hollywood creatives are making things that they want to see. They're making things for them, and they're putting their best efforts into it. Is this truly the best they can do? Mufasa, Mary, Chronicles of Narnia, but this time with rock and roll. Rings of Power, The Acolyte, Final Fantasy VII remade into 100 different games. Ridiculous censorship translating games from Eastern to Western markets. War of the Rohirrim, even Wicked, to an extent. Many of the projects I've just named are mediocre representations of original source material that has been bastardized to make studios money. But they're doing it in a way that I believe is going to damage our culture over time. I believe the remakes, reductionism, and revisionist history of creative media means the death of creativity for future generations. Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Pondering. I am the real-life fake wizard. If this video brings you any value at all, I invite you to subscribe to this channel where we're posting new videos just as much as we can. This is a difficult topic to flesh out because most everyone is going to have a differing opinion. Even though something like Robert Eger's Nosferatu, which I enjoyed very much, could be considered quite good, it's still a deviation of a deviation of a deviation. A remake of a reinterpretation, tracking all the way back to Dracula, the original novel. And what was that based on? Vlad the Impaler, a historical figure, of course, but also vampires and variations of bloodsuckers can be found all throughout human history in different cultures throughout the world. See, it's more than just the Dracula novel to Robert Eger's film. There was all of human history before that, with even 99% of the stories I don't know, and you don't know either. And to be clear, I'm not picking on Nosferatu 2024. I thought the movie was very good. Perhaps this is an outlier that got it right. So let's look at something else. Mufasa. Mufasa is big right now because it's competing with Sonic 3 at the box office. Mufasa is a prequel sequel to Lion King 2019, which is an animated live-action remake of a Disney classic, The Lion King from 1994. But did you know that story is not original at all? It's Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Yeah, it's the same story. And of course, Disney has always remade classic stories and made them into lovey-dovey princess films, haven't they? So the Disney reinterpretation is not new. But yeah, The Lion King is just Hamlet. And Hamlet may not be the first time that story was told either. The story of Hamlet could be tracked back to Amleth, which was a Viking tale from hundreds of years ago. Shakespeare is a hack. No, that's not what I'm saying, and that's not the point. I'm pretty sure Shakespeare even said he was inspired by the Viking story himself. I could be wrong. I'm no Shakespeare historian. The point being, 2024's shitty Mufasa film is just a deviation after deviation after deviation away from stories that were told around the campfire. Human beings are creatures of story and beliefs. Every single thing that makes us who we are the experiences that we have lived. And each of those experiences is a story. When others tell you their stories, you can choose whether or not to believe in said story. This is where we get lots of myths and legends that have been passed down throughout all of history. I mean, let's look at this Mary film, right? To which I don't know where you stand religiously, but I'm going to make some religious connections here. Mary 2024 is one of hundreds of retellings of the story of Jesus Christ's birth. Now, that story ties back to the Bible. And one of the biggest issues I have with retellings of scripture is the reductionist nature of each entry hereafter, right? Every single retelling is weaker than the one that came before it. This Mary film is not accurate to the source material, which is the Bible, and where there are missing pieces in the Bible, this film embellishes. This film is not the only one to do that, of course, nor is it the only genre to embellish where source material is not there. Look at War of the Rohirrim. Hera was not a named character in J.R.R. Tolkien's books. But anyway, we look at this Mary movie and, well, it's not very good. And it's not accurate to the source material, which in this case happens to be either the first or second most important event in the Christian faith, right? So it's very important to get it right because you've got millions of Christians who take this seriously. So if the film is not good and it's not accurate, does it not damage the importance for those who've never heard this story before to experience it at its best for the first time? Here, if the nativity story is either the first or second most important event in the entire Christian faith, and this sloppy girl boss modern retelling doesn't do it justice, then that's not fair to the original story itself. Let's take religion out of it for a moment because I know too many of you will not be able to empathize with the point I'm making because you're so jaded on Christianity. It's like, you're talking positively about Christianity. I'm not listening anymore. It's like, yeah, you weren't listening to begin with. I said nothing nice or positive about the modern-day organized religion aspect. The biblical story itself is and always will be the point. If humans are creatures of story and belief, then having companies whose job it is to be the storytellers of this age continue to reduce the value of stories of humanity down for the sake of content, it will not have good consequences for our future. Eventually, you and I will be dead. Our children will be dead. What does the generation after that have to look back on? 2025 Snow White? Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? Has-been hotel? What kind of myths and legends are we leaving behind? What men and women are so impactful today that stories will be told about them in 100 years? Well, why does Mufasa sucking so bad matter? Well, the character of Mufasa represented masculine leadership and goodness. He was a gentle but strong father and a well-respected leader, and I'm just talking about the animated movie here. And that force of good is murdered by malevolence. Mufasa is less of a character and more of an analogy of the best human virtues. And the rest of the film is one of the purest forms of what wrestling with malevolence looks like, and why you need to be willing to rise to fight the villains who tyrannize yourself and the ones you love. Of course, there's much more to the Hamlet story that makes it a tragedy, but in and of itself, we can empathize with the Lion King characters. We can connect with these emotions because we've felt them too. And by making a new film with an uninspired origin explaining every detail of Mufasa's rise, you've robbed us of the importance of Mufasa's original analogical importance. Mufasa is no longer a representation of pure goodness. He's just another flawed lion that survived a couple fights by the skin of his teeth. You've basically shaved his mane and you've cut his balls off. And worse, you've done it in the name of corporatism to make a quick profit on the fucking normies who don't know any better. J.R.R. Tolkien once said, "Evil cannot create anything new. It can only corrupt and ruin what good forces have invented or made." Now, the evil here is quite subjective. You could be referring to the person themselves committing the act, but I prefer to look at this from the perspective of the action, not the person. The act of diminishing the stories of human history is an act of evil. The person doing it may not be evil, but it is an evil thing to do. You're destroying the potential for those original stories to be heard by someone who has never heard them, and it could have changed their life. That's why geeks and nerds care so much about the death of their favorite franchises. Their lives are inspired by the values and virtues that these fictional characters represented. They themselves are better people because of the experiences they had with these stories. And every time some bitter, jaded, narcissistic fucking writer gets their hands on that clay of creativity, they don't make anything to further the mythos to inspire others. They fucking crush it. They bastardize it because maybe they didn't see the perfected version of themselves inside of that mythos. Or perhaps they think they could do this better. I can tell a better story. I can make better legends. I will rewrite history with my own modern spin on it. Then the normies and chuds will worship me, and they'll forget about George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Walt Disney. I want my name up in lights. I want my legacy. But then, of course, there is the third option, and it's contradictory to what I said I believe. They could just be malevolent. They could just want to watch the world burn. Look at that Joker 2. That was made to say fuck you to anyone who enjoyed the first film. Joker 2 is an apology to the Access Media machine for making Joker 1. Is there not some kind of malevolence there? All of that tracks back to Batman and Joker from the comics, right? Modern retelling to alter history to make it more suitable for modern audiences. Isn't that it? Censoring and dulling of speech and idea to not hurt the feelings of pathetically weak-willed vampiric parasites on society. Isn't that the new cause? I think, as someone who feels very passionately about all this, clearly, it's the morons on the internet who clap like seals at the release of any form of, well, let's just say content. The people who unknowingly or knowingly are celebrating the death of human culture. These are the people who make everything feel worse. It's like being outside and looking in and you can see the building is on fire, but the morons inside either refuse to acknowledge the smoke filling the air, deny its existence, or are enjoying the slow suffocation of death. We are culturally burning. And with every acolyte, every Rings of Power, every Doctor Who, every new fantasy book that's secretly just smut, every classic video game remade and cautiously neutered as to not offend, every adaptation that chooses embellishment and reinterpretation instead of authenticity, every piece of media that serves to just be content instead of a story that someone needs to and wants to share with the world, we get one more step away from what makes human beings being. Without stories, we lose our beliefs. Human connection means less. Relationships mean less. Being itself and individuality, the things that make you, are meaningless. And I can already hear some of the fucking naysayers in the comments like, "Oh, you're such a child, does it really matter that much?" I think it's the thing that matters most of all. Throughout history, it's storytelling that teaches people good and bad, right from wrong. History itself is a collection of stories. Science is all about the pursuit of a story. Why do things happen? Explain it. You yourself, in the meat sack that you are just a big storybook of memories. And it's like, well, no, it's not like Hollywood is going to stop or that stories are never going to be told again, right? No, it's more like the significance of stories is being lost with each retelling, reinterpretation, and reinvention. And if the significance of stories is reduced, and our future generations don't receive them, perhaps in the way that we did or we do, what do they become, if not mindless drones? I only have this point of view because of the stories I've lived, witnessed, and experienced, the stories I've consumed. And if you disagree with me, which is very possible, And that would probably be a good thing. That's a good thing because what I'm saying is pretty negative. It's only because of the stories you've lived, witnessed, experienced, and consumed. Now, imagine a world where you're talking with people who are unable to even articulate a conversation like this, for it or against it, because they've never experienced the stories that have given them an emotional reason to give a shit. They wouldn't know any different, and they would all be the same. Something to think about, certainly, and not something I can give a clear, definitive answer on right now. The best advice I would have is to learn how to be creative in your daily life and pass that on to the next generation. They're going to need it. Thank you for joining me for this pondering video. If you would please like the video if you enjoyed this. And if I brought you any value and you'd like to hear more from me and see more from me, consider hitting the subscribe button. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire, and for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. If this video wasn't enough to convince you, I don't know what will. Godspeed.